Welcome back. There are two main virtualization technologies. One is using virtual machines and the other one is using Docker. This lecture is about Docker, rather an introduction to Docker. Okay? So what is Docker? It is the virtualization technology. Docker, like virtual machines, not only allows you to run applications in a separate environment, but it does more than that. It is one of the key DevOps technology. Docker helps you to script almost the entire runtime environment. This script file is called Dockerfile. Essentially, Dockerfile contains all the commands to build Docker image. Okay? And then you build a Docker image from the Dockerfile. The command to build Docker image is docker build and path of the Dockerfile, right? Docker build and the path of the Dockerfile. And then run the image in a separate environment called Docker container. Okay? And the command to run a Docker image is the docker run and Docker image name. Okay? So our goal in this video is to launch an Apache web server on Docker container and then connect the running Docker container's bash shell to modify Apache index.html and see if we get the modified index.html. Okay? I'm using Mac. First, I'll go through the installation of Docker on Mac. If you're using Windows, the installation process of Docker on Windows is a little different. I will add the URL for installing Docker on Windows. So once Docker is installed, make sure the Docker daemon is running because Docker is a client-server based architecture. So you have to make sure that the Docker daemon is running. And then I will pull httpd docker image, which is basically Apache web server, from the Docker hub, which hosts Docker images. Okay? Docker default pulls images from the Docker hub. You can also pull and push Docker images from other repos besides the Docker hub. For instance, you can push and pull images from Artifactory. Okay? And you can also create Docker images and push them to Docker hub, creating Docker images out of the scope of this video. Okay? And then I will run the Docker container from the pulled image. And then we'll look at the result whether index.html is displayed to make sure Docker container is running successfully. Okay, then we'll connect to Docker container bash shell. Then I will modify index.html file and check the result. If I'm getting the modified index.html, okay, and then we'll see some other Docker commands such as listing Docker images, listing Docker containers, how to stop Docker container and how to start Docker container. And then at the end of this section, we will see how to remove Docker container and Docker images. So let's first install Docker on Mac. Okay, command is, let me copy and paste command. Okay, right now it has downloaded Docker DMG, right? And it is installing Cask. Cask takes care of the installation of UI part of Docker for Mac, okay? Because Docker is a client-server architecture, so on the Mac, to take care of the server part, there is a good UI has been provided by Mac. Using that UI, you can run many Docker commands. For example, you can start Docker daemon. There are many other things that you could do. It is progressing, and now it says that Docker was successfully installed. Okay? Now the next thing is that we need to make sure that Docker daemon is running. Okay? To start Docker daemon, I have to go to Docker UI for Mac. Okay? Let me pull out Docker UI. As you can see, that Docker engine is starting means Docker daemon is starting. Okay? This is Docker UI on Mac. Okay? It has so many other options, and here this option for uninstall and get support, restart. So if you need to uninstall, you just go here on the bug and click on uninstall. Now the Docker engine is running. The next thing is that what we'll do is we will pull the Docker httpd image. Okay? How to pull a Docker image? The command is docker pull and image name. Since we are pulling the httpd image, the question is, how do I know where to find the httpd image? You can find all the images on Docker Hub. This is Docker Hub. Okay? If I'm looking for, say, an Apache web server, right? As you can see, this is the official image for the Apache HTTP server. Okay, if you just click here, the command to pull this image is docker pull httpd. Okay, it's already given here. Another interesting thing is that these are different versions of this Docker file. If I just give docker pull httpd without the version, it will pull the latest image. Okay, this will pull this guy. But if I need to pull an image of a particular version, say if I'm pulling Alpine 314, then I'll say docker. Let me copy this one. I'll say Alpine 3.14. So that way it will pull Alpine 3.14 image. Okay, let me pull the latest httpd image. Okay, you can see it says using the default tag latest, which means if we don't provide any version, then default pulls the version with the latest tag. Okay, right now the httpd image has been pulled from the Docker repository, and this Docker Hub is the public repository. You can find many public images here. For example, you can find Docker images for Kafka. You can find images for MySQL, right? Most of the images you can find here. There are a lot of images here, and if you have your own image, you build it, and then you can publish it on the Docker Hub. Okay. So right now, what we have done is pulled out the httpd image and list that image. You can notice Docker image command is very simple. Now let's say ls. As you can notice, currently in my Docker environment there is only one image, which is httpd, and the tag is the latest. It also includes the image ID, created date, and size. Okay, so now the image has been pulled. Let's run this Docker image, right? Let's run this Docker image. So how do I run this Docker image? Say docker run and the image name. Image name is httpd. Okay, as you can notice, it is running, but I will find it difficult to access the web server. So let me close this. Essentially what I need to do, I need to provide a couple of other environment parameters. I say docker run d, which means I'll be running this Docker container as a daemon, right? And then I'll say p port mapping 8082. This means I am mapping this host port to the container port 80, and then I will give the image name. Okay, so this will run the httpd image and will create a container. Okay, then it will run as a daemon, and the port mapping is to the container port 80. This means that this web server will be running on port 80. I will map container port 80 to my local Mac port 8082 to access the web server from the Chrome browser. Okay, from outside of the container. Let's run it. You can see the Docker container has started, and it has given this long ID. Okay, if you want to check out that Docker container right now, you can see one Docker container in this Docker environment, and it is up for 90 seconds. And this is port mapping. Okay. Now I need to find out what is inside the Docker container and whether the web server is running or not. I will open the Chrome browser. Since port mapping is the 8082, I'll say localhost 8082. I got the output from the Apache web server running inside the container, right? I will check the actual file to know whether it gives the correct result. Okay. What I did, I pulled the Docker image httpd, and then I ran the Docker image. Now next thing, what I will do, I will connect to this running container. I ran it as a daemon because I wanted to show you how to connect this container from the outside. Essentially, you will be running as a Docker daemon because it's not a good idea to have it running without a daemon, because if somebody does Control-C, the container will be stopped. So it's a good idea to run it as a daemon. Now, since the container is running, let's go to the container shell to look into the index.html file and modify the index.html. Okay? The question is how to connect to the running Docker container. Okay? Well, the command is docker exec, okay? And then IT is for interactive mode. What the command does is that it creates a connection from this terminal to the Docker stdin. Okay? stdin is the standard interface. And then next is the container name. I can give either the container name or just the container ID. I can enter A87. 3 characters is fine because that way it really will be able to differentiate. You don't need to give all characters. Even if you can give just 1 character, it will work in this case. Somehow, the command needs to differentiate which container ID I'm talking about. Since there is only one container, even if I give just one character, it's fine, because it knows this container is running. Okay, let's type A87. Typically, I give 3 characters. Docker exec IT container ID, and next I have to give bash shell. Let's run it. Right now, I'm at the bash shell of the container. Okay, you can do ls here. It shows the Apache web server directory. Then go to htdocs and catindex.html file. So you can see that this is the output. It shows the output of the index.html file, which is a simple file, just contains one line. It works. Okay? We connected to the running Docker container and saw the file index.html, right? Let's modify this file to see how to modify the file inside Docker container. In order to modify the file, first we need, let me do the vi index.html. Okay, vi is not found. So we need to install vi. The question is how to install vi. Okay, to install vi, first what we need to do, it's a bit tricky, but I have Googled it and found out. So what I'll do first is I need to update the OS. Let me run apt-get update. Apt-get is the package manager on the Debian, and on the Red Hat Linux, instead of apt-get, we use yum. So we have updated the OS binary. If there are any new updates or patches, the OS has been updated now. So we updated the OS. Now next we need to install vi, right? To install it, say apt-get install vim. This will install vi. Say yes. Okay, so what I did right now on this running Docker container is I installed vi. Now I can cat index.html and I can modify it. Okay, so let me modify it and let me write it something like, say inside Docker container. Okay, say it works and save it. Okay, so let's go and see whether we are getting the output of this modified HTML or not. Let's refresh it, okay? Oh, the spelling is wrong. Let me change the spelling. Okay, save it. Let's go back and see the result. Okay, we are getting the correct result, which is Apache web server running inside a Docker container. It works. Okay, what I did was that I modified the index.html to show how we can modify a file inside a running Docker container. Okay, we will list Docker images, right? Let me come out from this guy. I'll say exit. So now I'm out of this container. And if I want to go back again, I can say docker exec and I'll return to the Docker container. Okay? To come out, say exit. So right now, the Docker container is running. To list Docker images, how many images do we have? The command is docker image ls. As you can see, it lists only one image. Now say you want to pull another image. For example, MySQL Docker image. How can you do that? The command is docker pull and then image name. Docker pull MySQL, right? This is MySQL image. I've pulled it. Now, if I list again, docker image ls, it shows 2 images, which is correct. To continue further, if I need to pull a Kafka image, how can I pull a Kafka image? Let's go to the Docker Hub and type here, Kafka. As you can see, the Kafka image name. You see it says Bitnami Kafka. That means the user ID is Bitnami. With that user ID, this Kafka image has been uploaded, right? So in order to pull it, you will have to give Bitnami Kafka. Let's click here. Copy this command and pull this image. So the same way. Say, if I would like to push a Kafka image on the Docker Hub, then this image name will be skSing Kafka. I'm assuming my user ID will be skSing, okay? So right now, it is pulling the Kafka image. It is pulling the latest one, right? Because there is no tag given with the colon, right? So it is pulling the latest Kafka image. Now, if you list here, so we have 3 images here, right? To find out how many Docker containers I have in my current Docker environment, the command is docker container ls. Right now there is only one container running. Let's run another container. Docker run MySQL. Okay? Now, suppose I would like to run a Kafka container. Let's run the Kafka container with the Kafka image that I downloaded. Docker run. And the image name, which is Bitnami Kafka. Okay? You can see this. But ignore it. Let's do docker container ls. And you can see that because there was an error. That's the reason you only see that one container is still running. Let's run the MySQL container. See what we get. Okay, it says all these things I have to give. The password did not specify this, all this thing, right? Let's list here. Still, only one of them is running because we did not run in a proper way. What are the options to run it? So I'll go to Docker Hub. Okay. For Kafka, I can find out how to run this image by looking into their documentation. So what it says about how to run it, it says that in order to run it, Docker pull. This is fine. See, for example, if you go further, it will give other details, right? For example, if you want to run Kafka, run this way. So Docker Hub provides all the details of how to run a Docker image. It gives all the details, right? Similarly, let's go to MySQL, okay? We downloaded this guy, right? So if you go down, scroll down, and it displays how to run it. I think you got the idea of finding images on Docker Hub and getting their related details. Go to Docker Hub, find the image, read the details, how to run it. So we are running only one container, which is fine because our goal was to run a web server, which we successfully ran, right? We listed Docker containers and we listed images, okay? Our next task is to learn how to start and stop a Docker container. So if I want to stop this Docker container, I say Docker stop, correct? And container ID, which is A87, okay? So right now, if I go to the web server, we will not see any result because the Docker container is stopped. So if I do docker container ls, it does not list any container. However, if I type docker ps, it will show all the containers. Okay, let's start this Docker container, docker start. And this container, A87, is started. Now if I go back again, refresh. You see, I got the output from the web server back again. This is how you will start and stop a Docker container. Okay? If you want to remove this Docker container, the command is docker container rm, right? And then A87. Sorry, there is a typo. But it won't be removed because the Docker container is already running. So before removing a Docker container, the container must be stopped. So first, we need to stop this Docker container. You say docker container stop to stop it. Okay? So this will stop the Docker container. Now, the Docker container is stopped. If I try to remove it, this container is gone. Okay? If I do docker container ls, the container is not listed. It's deleted. If you want to see all the processes, our A87 container is not listed here. That is deleted. Okay? And what's going on with the image? Do I still have the image or not? I still have this image. All three images are still here, right? Because I haven't removed any image. So let's remove, say, MySQL image. How will we do? Docker image rm and the name of the image or the image ID. I usually use image ID, but you can also use the image name. So let's give 2DE. First, 3 characters are fine because Docker can differentiate which image needs to be removed. I got the message, unable to delete an image is being used by the stopped container D6552CFF3FD9. Okay, so one image could be used in many containers, right? One stopped container is using this image. I need to first remove that stopped container. Either I can remove it or I can force Docker container and say D65, right? This guy. Now let's remove this Docker container. Okay, so the Docker container is removed. Let's try to remove the HTTPD image, or I can give HTTPD. Okay. But still, there is one more container. So there is another container referencing this Docker image. What can I do? I mean, you can play around and do it, but I'll just use the force command to see how to do force. Docker image rm httpd -- force. Okay. So now it has removed the HTTPD image. So if I do Docker image ls, you can see that HTTPD is deleted. Okay. The same way. If we want to remove the MySQL image, you say Docker image rm MySQL. Okay. So it has been deleted. These are all the other images that MySQL is referencing. So it will remove all other images as well. So you have got the idea of how to remove a Docker image. Okay. You can also remove all containers and all images. This command will remove all Docker containers. And there is a command to remove all Docker images as well. I'll just copy and paste it here. So this will remove all Docker images from this local Docker environment. I think you understood how to remove Docker containers and Docker images.